A mean bully violently hit a 78-year-old grandmother, sending her crashing down in a crowded restaurant. Everyone just stared, completely frozen, too scared to speak even one word. The bully chuckled, believing he was like an unbeatable king in his little town, thinking nobody could ever stop him. But he made one huge mistake. He didn't know her son was a Navy SEAL, and that he and his special trained dog were about to walk through that exact door. Before we start, tell us what part of the world you're from. And if this story makes you feel something special, please hit subscribe for more amazing stories. The air in Aspen Ridge, Colorado felt fresh and cold as winter was getting close. It was early October, and the mountains surrounding the town looked absolutely gorgeous, covered in golden, red, and dark green trees. A thin layer of frost had made the pine tree needles sparkle silver during the night, and now the morning sun was melting it into tiny shining water drops that looked like miniature diamonds. The smell of pine trees and wet dirt was everywhere, making everything feel peaceful. This was exactly the kind of peace Alara Wilson had been hoping to find. Alara was a woman in her late 70s, with pretty white hair tied neatly on her head and eyes that were soft and sky blue. She pulled her knitted blanket tighter around her body. Her husband had passed away, and she had lived through many hard times in her long life, with a quiet strength that some people mistakenly thought meant she was weak. But deep inside, she was incredibly strong. That strength came from love, from losing people she cared about, and from raising an amazing son all by herself. That son, Owen, had just bought a gorgeous, private house right next to Lake Serenity, just outside town. He wanted his mom to have a peaceful place away from all the noise of the big city. This long vacation was his special gift, a place where she could simply relax and breathe. She pushed open the glass door of the mountaintop diner, and a little bell rang happily to let everyone know someone was coming in. The diner was the center of Aspen Ridge, a warm, cozy spot with old wooden tables, red cushion seats, and the wonderful smell of fresh coffee, sizzling bacon, and sweet maple syrup. It was exactly Alara's favorite type of place, simple and friendly. Behind the counter, a young woman named Chloe Vance worked really fast and efficiently. Chloe was barely in her early 20s, with watchful eyes and a bunch of dark curly hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She grew up in Aspen Ridge and understood how things worked there, both the good parts and the dangerous parts. She gave Alara a quick, real smile. "Good morning. Just you today?" "Just me," Alara answered softly but clearly. "Could I sit at a table by the window if that's okay?" Of course. As Alara got comfortable in her seat, she looked outside the window. A young man, probably visiting from somewhere else, was setting up a camera across the street. This was Liam Webb, someone who made travel videos online and was getting more and more popular for his Real America videos. He was full of happy energy, wearing a trendy hat over his blonde hair. He was adjusting his camera, hoping to film the charming diner, the perfect opening shot for his video about Colorado's hidden special places. Alara's peaceful moment was completely destroyed by a loud, booming voice that seemed to suck all the warmth out of the room. Well, look what we've got here. More city money coming to visit us." The voice came from Cade Jennings. He was a big, scary-looking man in his 50s who did construction work in town. His body was large, but more from drinking beer and being angry than from actual hard work. His face was always red, and his small, mean eyes looked around the diner like he owned the place. He wore a dirty work jacket and had an ugly sneer on his face that seemed stuck there permanently. He was sitting in a corner table with two other men, who laughed whenever he said something, like his followers. Alara decided to ignore him and looked at the menu instead. But Cade wasn't someone who liked being ignored. He pushed himself up from his seat, his heavy boots making loud sounds on the floor as he walked toward her. Everyone in the diner stopped talking. They all knew Cade. They all knew to stay away from him. He stopped right next to her table, casting a big shadow over her. "Don't see many people like you in here," he said in a fake friendly voice. "Your type usually goes to those fancy, expensive restaurants up on the mountain." Alara looked up at him calmly. "I think the coffee here is much better," she replied politely. Behind the counter, Chloe's smile disappeared. Her jaw was tight. She knew exactly what was happening. Cade Jennings worked for Sterling Croft, the developer trying to buy all the land around the lake. Cade's job was to scare people into selling their property. Chloe quietly reached under the counter and found her phone. She carefully set it up between a napkin holder and some menus, making sure the camera could see Ilara's table clearly, and pressed record. This wasn't the first time she'd seen him bully someone, but this time felt different, more dangerous. Cade's mean smile got bigger. Is that right? Well, enjoy it while you can. Some of us are trying to keep what makes this town special, not turn it into some playground for rich people who don't belong here. I promise you, I have no plans to change your town, Ilara said, her voice staying calm even though she could feel worry growing inside her stomach. She thought about her husband who had passed away. He was incredibly kind and quietly strong. He would have known how to handle someone like this, not by being aggressive, but by being calm and dignified in a way that would make a bully feel small. She tried to remember that strength. Oh, I think you do. Cade shot back, his voice getting louder, making everyone in the diner look over, including Liam outside, who zoomed his camera in, curious about what was happening. I heard you're the one stopping progress over at the lake. Someone made a really good offer for that property your son bought, but you're just too stubborn to understand. So that's what this was about. This wasn't random bullying, it was planned. It was about the house. Owen had warned her that the developer was pushy, but she never expected this. The house is not for sale, Ilara stated firmly. My son bought it for our family. Cade leaned in closer, his voice becoming a scary growl. Your family? You mean the son who's never even here? The one who dumps a bunch of money on a house and leaves his old mother here to be a problem for hard-working local people. He put his thick, dirty-looking knuckles on her table. This is a small town, lady. We have our own way of doing things. We don't like outsiders coming in, buying expensive land, and refusing to cooperate. It messes everything up. Ilara could feel everyone staring at her. She saw fear in some people's faces, annoyance in others, but nobody moved to help her. They were trapped by small-town politics, afraid of a man who controlled things through threats and connections. She felt incredibly alone, a feeling she hadn't experienced since the first few weeks after her husband died. But she wouldn't let this man scare her. There is nothing right about trying to bully a woman into selling her home, she said, her voice quiet but strong and clear. Now please leave me alone. I would like to eat my breakfast in peace. The way she stood up to him seemed to make Cade snap. His face turned an even darker red, all blotchy and angry. The pretend conversation was over. This was pure bullying now, and he was enjoying having an audience. Cade Jennings's face looked like a mask of complete rage. The quiet, strong way this woman stood up to him was an insult he couldn't handle. In his world, power was loud, rude, and physical. Her calmness was something he didn't understand, and it made him furious. Ilara knew she couldn't win an argument with someone like this. There was no point in trying to reason with him. Her only choice was to leave the situation calmly, and with dignity. She stood up, placing a few crisp dollar bills on the table to pay for the coffee she would never drink. I hope you have a better day, sir, she said softly, and turned to leave. That was the final thing that set him off. Her refusal to argue. Her calm way of dismissing him as nothing more than an unpleasant interruption made Cade lose complete control. He moved surprisingly fast for such a big man, stepping in front of her to block the door. You think you're better than me? He screamed, his voice echoing through the completely silent diner. Spit flew from his mouth. You walk in here, look down on all of us, and then just walk away. Before Ilara could react, he swung his thick arm across the small table. The heavy coffee mug, still half full of hot coffee, went flying. Ilara gasped and jerked back as the hot liquid splashed across the floor and wall. A few burning drops hit the back of her hand. The sound of the mug smashing on the floor was like a gunshot. The shock of it, the sudden violence, made her stumble. For a moment, she felt confused, her heart pounding hard in her chest. In that moment of weakness, Cade made his terrible decision. He saw her fear, and it fed the ugly anger inside him. He pulled back his hand, the thick gold ring on his finger shining under the lights, and swung. The sound of the slap was sharp, ugly, and final. It cut through the silence like a knife, a sound that would stay in the memory of everyone there forever. Ilara cried out, a small, sharp sound of pain and shock. The force of the hit wasn't overwhelming, but the surprise in being off balance sent her stumbling backward. Her heel caught on a chair leg, and she fell, collapsing onto the cold, hard floor. Everyone in the diner gasped at the same time. People froze with forks halfway to their mouths. Across the street, Liam Webb's jaw dropped. His camera, still recording, had captured the entire horrible event in perfect, crystal-clear detail. Behind the counter, Chloe Vance felt a wave of cold anger rush through her. Her knuckles turned white as she gripped the counter edge. Her own phone was still faithfully recording the crime. And then the bell above the door rang. The man who walked in was the complete opposite of Cade Jennings. He was in his late 30s, wearing a simple dark green shirt, worn jeans, and strong hiking boots. The clothes were ordinary, but they couldn't hide the coiled strength in his body. The broad shoulders, the lean, muscular build of someone whose body was like a finely tuned weapon. He moved with an unsettling smoothness, like a predator. His eyes, a deep, piercing blue that held none of his mother's gentleness, swept across the room and took in the entire scene in a split second. He saw his mother on the floor. He saw the broken mug. And he saw Cade Jennings standing over her, chest puffed out like he'd won something. This was Owen Wilson. At his side, on a simple leather leash, sat Shadow. The German Shepherd was a magnificent animal, 100 pounds of sleek black and tan muscle. His ears stood straight up, his dark, intelligent eyes locked on Cade. He didn't bark or lunge. He sat perfectly still, giving off a calm, controlled energy that was somehow way more terrifying than any noise. Owen's eyes locked onto his mother. His expression didn't change, but something inside him flipped like a switch. The calm vacationer was gone. The Navy SEAL was now in complete control. He gave a single, quiet command. Watch. The word was barely a whisper, but Shadow responded immediately. He moved from sitting to a low crouch. A deep, rumbling growl came from his chest. It wasn't the sound of an angry pet. It was the professional warning of a trained military dog. He didn't attack. He flowed forward smoothly, placing his body directly between Cade and the fallen Ilara. His eyes never left the bully. The message was crystal clear. You will not take one more step toward her. Cade Jennings, who had faced down angry husbands and competing businessmen, froze. His cockiness, so strong just a moment ago, disappeared completely in the face of the silent, deadly promise radiating from the dog. He took a step backward without even meaning to. Owen completely ignored him. He walked forward, his steps silent and measured, and knelt beside his mother. Mom, are you okay? His voice was gentle, the harsh edge gone, reserved only for her. Owen, she whispered, her hand going to her red cheek. I'm all right, dear. Just startled. He helped her to her feet with easy strength, his eyes scanning her for injuries. He saw the red mark on her cheek, the splash of coffee on her hand, and something cold and hard settled in his eyes. Once he was sure she was steady, he turned his full, undivided attention to Cade Jennings. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. The low, flat tone he used carried more threat than any shout ever could. You just made a serious mistake. From a table in the back of the diner, another man watched everything unfold. Sheriff Brody Kent, a man in his late 50s with a face weathered by sun and years, slowly lowered his coffee cup. He wore his uniform with a lazy, comfortable authority, the silver star on his chest polished, but his manner suggesting he hadn't had to do any real police work in years. He'd been watching Cade's performance with a look of bored amusement. Cade was useful, and the old woman had been a problem. But this quiet, dangerous-looking man and his military-grade dog was unexpected. The sheriff sighed. It looked like he'd have to get involved after all. Not to arrest Cade, of course not, but to manage the situation, to contain the damage. He slowly pushed himself out of his seat, adjusting the gun belt on his hips, and began walking toward the center of the diner, his face wearing a practiced look of official concern. Sheriff Brody Kent walked forward casually, like he wasn't really in a hurry. He approached the tense situation not with urgency, but with the tired attitude of someone annoyed by a barking dog. His eyes, though, missed nothing. He noticed the phone in the waitress's hand, the tourist with the camera across the street, and the unyielding posture of the stranger. "All right, folks, let's just calm everything down," the sheriff said in a friendly, country-sounding voice meant to soothe people and take control. He gave Cade a familiar nod. "Cade, you been drinking this early?" Cade Jennings, who had been frozen by Shadow's presence, seemed to find his confidence again when his friend arrived. "Sheriff, this ain't nothing. Just a little misunderstanding. This lady—" "I saw what happened," Owen interrupted, his voice quiet but sharp enough to cut through the sheriff's fake calmness. He didn't look at the sheriff, keeping his focus completely on Cade. Sheriff Kent finally turned his attention to Owen. "And who might you be, son?" "He's my son," Ilara said, her voice shaking slightly but firm. "Owen Wilson." "Owen Wilson," Owen added, still not breaking his stare. "Well, Mr. Wilson," the sheriff said, stepping between Owen and Cade, a subtle move to break their eye contact. "In Aspen Ridge, we handle our own disagreements. No need for things to get out of hand. Why don't you take your mother home, and we'll call it a day?" It was a dismissal, a clear attempt to sweep the attack under the rug. Owen recognized it immediately. He'd seen the same trick in corrupt local governments all over the world. "This disagreement was a criminal assault," Owen stated firmly, "and I expect an official report to be filed." The sheriff's friendly mask tightened. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. "Now listen here, son. I'm the law in this town, and I say what's what." It was a heated moment. No real harm done. Owen finally turned his head, his piercing blue eyes meeting the sheriff's for the first time. The sheriff felt an unexpected jolt, like he was being assessed and judged by a predator. "My mother was knocked to the floor," Owen said, each word precise and cold. "There are at least a dozen witnesses, and that man," he nodded toward Cade, "is going to be arrested, or this will become a very different kind of problem." He gave the leash a gentle tug. "Shadow heel." The German shepherd immediately stopped his watch, backing up to sit perfectly at Owen's side, though his eyes stayed locked on Cade. Owen put a steadying arm around his mother's shoulders. "Let's go, Mom." He guided her toward the door, moving with purpose that nobody dared to challenge. As they passed the counter, he made quick eye contact with Chloe, giving her a single, almost invisible nod of gratitude. Once outside in the fresh mountain air, Owen helped his mother into the passenger seat of his sturdy Ford F-150. He checked her cheek again, the red mark already starting to darken. A cold, controlled fury simmered just beneath his calm exterior. He walked around to the driver's side, and before starting the engine, he pulled out his phone. It wasn't a regular smartphone. It was a tough, encrypted device. He scrolled through a short list of contacts and pressed a name. The call was answered immediately. "Go for Wilson," a gruff voice said. "This is Owen Wilson," he began, his voice completely emotionless, a total contrast to the gentle tone he used with his mother. "I'm reporting a targeted physical assault on a military dependent, my mother, Ilara Wilson. The incident occurred in Aspen Ridge, Colorado. The assailant has been identified. Local law enforcement is on scene and appears to be compromised. I am requesting immediate NCIS liaison and a formal case file to be opened." He listened for a moment. "Affirmative. I have secured the dependent. We are proceeding to a safe location. I have multiple civilian video recordings of the incident. Will forward when secure." He ended the call. Meanwhile, across the street, Liam Webb was experiencing every videomaker's dream. His hands were shaking with adrenaline. He knew with absolute certainty that he had just captured the video of a lifetime. He didn't hesitate. He packed up his gear, rushed back to his rented cabin, and immediately began uploading the raw, unedited footage to his channel. He thought hard about the title for a few moments before settling on pure viral gold. Bully savagely attacks elderly woman, confronted by Navy SEAL and K-9 protector. He hit publish. The effect was instant. Within the first hour, the video had 100,000 views. By the third hour, it had crossed 1 million. The internet's outrage was like a tidal wave. The comment section was a flood of fury and support. "That old man is a coward. Find him. Did you see that dog? That's a trained military K-9. Good boy. Who is that hero? Someone get him a medal." The video was shared by every major veteran support group on social media. It was picked up by news websites, then by cable news channels. The ripple effect had become a tsunami. In a sleek, glass-walled office in Denver, Sterling Croft, a man in his late 40s with slick-back hair and a suit that cost more than most cars, slammed his fist on his fancy desk. Sterling was the architect of the Aspen Preserve project, someone who saw beautiful landscapes not as places of beauty, but as money-making opportunities. He was watching Liam's video on his computer, his handsome face twisted in anger. "Idiot," he hissed, grabbing his phone. He dialed a number. "Get me Thorne. Now." A few miles away, Mayor Garrison Thorne, a man in his early 60s whose polished, grandfatherly image hid a core of pure greed, was in a meeting about town beautification. His phone buzzed with an urgent text. He excused himself, stepping into his private office and answering the call. "Sterling, this had better be important. Your man Jennings is a liability." Croft spat, his voice tight with rage. "He's all over the internet assaulting some old woman. And not just any old woman. Apparently her son is some kind of special forces soldier." Mayor Thorne felt a cold knot form in his stomach. He quickly pulled up the video on his own computer. He watched the slap, the fall, and the arrival of the quiet, dangerous man and his dog. He heard Cade's voice loudly mentioning the real estate deal. "This is a disaster," Thorne breathed. "You need to fix this, Garrison." Sterling Croft's voice was like ice. "You and your pet sheriff bury it. Discredit the video. Pay off the woman. I don't care what you do. But if this mess jeopardizes the final land acquisition, the investors are going to want to know who to hold responsible. And I will give them your name." The line went dead. Back in Aspen Ridge, online detectives were already at work. Using facial recognition and cross-referencing local business listings, they had a name in under an hour. Cade Jennings, owner of Jennings Construction. Within another hour, they had connected him to his primary client, Sterling Croft, and the Aspen Preserve LLC. And from there, it was a short leap to his most prominent political supporter, Mayor Garrison Thorne, who had personally championed the zoning changes for Croft's project. The names Cade Jennings, Sterling Croft, and Mayor Garrison Thorne began trending on Twitter right alongside hashtags like Justice for Alara. The ripple had reached the shore, and it was about to crash down on them all. The meeting took place in the back room of a fancy hunting lodge, a place that smelled of old leather, cedarwood, and secret agreements. This was Mayor Garrison Thorne's unofficial office, a place of power far from the public eye of City Hall. Sterling Croft was already there, pacing in front of a massive stone fireplace, where a low fire crackled. He had driven up from Denver himself, his expensive suit looking ridiculously out of place against the rustic backdrop. Sheriff Brody Kent leaned against a wall, cleaning his fingernails with a pocket knife, looking completely bored. Mayor Thorne entered and closed the heavy wooden door behind him, shutting out the world. "The problem is contained," he announced, though his voice lacked conviction. Sterling Croft spun around. "Contained? Garrison, your problem has its own hashtag and is the #1 trending video in the country. My investors are calling. They're seeing headlines linking my company to a violent assault. Contained is not the word I would use." "Cade is a fool," the mayor admitted, pouring himself a large glass of bourbon from a crystal bottle. "But he's our fool. Brody has already talked to him. He'll keep his mouth shut." The sheriff grunted his agreement without looking up. "It's not about Cade keeping his mouth shut." Croft snapped, his voice sharp and loud. "It's about the woman's son, Owen Wilson. My people have been digging. The man is a ghost. No social media, no public records beyond basic military service. But he's not just a soldier, Garrison. He's a Navy SEAL. Active duty. Do you have any idea what that means? It means he's a professional problem solver. And we," he gestured around the room, "are now his problem." This was the core of their conspiracy, exposed in the firelight. For 2 years, the three men had run Aspen Ridge like their own private kingdom. Their plan was simple and brutally effective. Sterling Croft, with his deep-pocketed and morally flexible investors, identified prime real estate, especially the undeveloped land around Lake Serenity. Mayor Thorne would then use his political power to rezone the areas, create bureaucratic roadblocks for existing owners, and approve crofts projects with suspicious speed. Their final and most crucial component was enforcement. That's where Sheriff Kent and men like Cade Jennings came in. When a homeowner refused a lowball offer, the harassment would begin. Sheriff Kent's deputies would suddenly start issuing tickets for minor code violations. Permit applications for simple home repairs would get lost in a sea of red tape. Then Cade Jennings and his crew would escalate things. Accidental property damage, late-night noise, verbal intimidation. Most people, especially retirees or vacation homeowners, would eventually break. They would sell cheap just to escape the nightmare. The plan had been flawless. They had already acquired 70% of the lakeshore. Ilara Wilson's property was the final critical piece, the largest parcel with the best view, the key to unlocking the entire multi-hundred-million-dollar Aspen Preserve luxury resort. Her stubborn refusal to sell, inspired by her son's wish for her to have a peaceful retreat, was costing them millions in potential profits. The attack was supposed to be the final terrifying push. It was supposed to show her she wasn't safe, that her peaceful retirement would be anything but. "The son is just one man," Sheriff Kent finally said, closing his knife with a snap. "He's on vacation. He'll make some noise, file a complaint, and then he'll have to go back to whatever base he came from. In the meantime, I'll handle things here." "How, Brody?" the mayor asked, desperation in his voice. "The FBI might get involved. NCIS, for God's sake." "Let them come," the sheriff said with a lazy smile. "They'll find a simple assault case. Cade will get a slap on the wrist. I'll make sure the report is airtight. Just a local dispute that got out of hand. Nothing connecting it to anything bigger. As for the son, we'll just keep an eye on him. Make sure he understands he's a guest here, and that guests can be made to feel very unwelcome." Owen Wilson knew he was being watched. He had driven his mother back to the secluded lake house, a beautiful modern cabin made of dark wood and huge panes of glass that looked out over the still, clear water of Lake Serenity. He had settled her into a comfortable armchair with a warm cup of tea and a blanket, but his mind was already in mission mode. His vacation was over. As he stood at the large window, seemingly admiring the view, his eyes were actually scanning the tree line. Across the road, he had noticed it on the drive-in, a dark blue car parked in a dirt turnout a quarter-mile down the road. It had no reason to be there. It wasn't a fisherman's truck or a hiker's car. It was an observer's post. "Shadow perimeter," he said quietly. The German shepherd, who had been lying faithfully at Ilara's feet, rose without a sound. He trotted to the back door, and Owen let him out. Owen watched as the dog moved, not like a pet, but like a soldier, using the cover of the dense woods to sweep the property line in a wide, silent circle. Owen went to his duffel bag. From it, he pulled not clothes, but a series of small, discreet devices. He moved through the house with practiced efficiency, placing tiny wireless motion sensors at key entry points, doors, windows, and the long driveway. He activated a small portable jammer that would disrupt any simple listening devices that might be planted nearby. Finally, he took out a small thermal scope and scanned the woods again. He caught a fleeting heat signature from the blue car, 2 people inside. His peaceful vacation retreat had just become a forward operating base. He sat down across from his mother, his manner calm and reassuring. "Mom, I need you to stay inside for a while. Keep the doors locked. Don't answer for anyone but me." Ilara looked at her son. She saw the quiet intensity in his eyes, the subtle shift in his posture. She had seen it before, in the rare moments between his deployments, when the weight of his hidden world would briefly surface. She didn't know the details of his work, only that it was dangerous and important. She knew he was a protector. "Owen, what's happening?" she asked, her voice steady. "The men who sent that man to the diner," he said. "They're not going to stop. The video going public has made them desperate. They're going to try to intimidate us into silence." He leaned forward. "But they've made a critical mistake. They think they're dealing with a scared old woman and her vacationing son. They don't know who we are. They don't know that we don't intimidate." He gave her a small, confident smile, a smile that said, "I have this under control." "They wanted a war over this piece of land," he said, his voice dropping to a low, determined whisper. They're about to get one. The viral video was afire, and Mayor Garrison Thorne's first instinct was to stamp it out with force. His strategy, hatched with Sheriff Kent in the smoky back room of the lodge, had two parts: discredit the source and silence the witnesses. The first target was Chloe Vance. She was in the middle of her afternoon shift, the diner still buzzing with gossip about the morning's events, when her manager, a perpetually nervous man named Howard, called her into his tiny, cluttered office. Howard was someone who lived in fear. Fear of bad reviews, fear of the health inspector, and most of all, fear of upsetting powerful people like the mayor. Chloe, he began, avoiding her eyes and shuffling papers on his desk. Corporate got word of the incident this morning, and the video you took. I was documenting a crime, Howard, Chloe said, her arms crossed. She knew what was coming. Be that as it may, he mumbled. You violated company policy. Our social media guidelines are very clear. You can't post videos of the establishment or its customers without authorization. I didn't post it. I sent it to the police as evidence and to a local news outlet, she said, a small bluff to see his reaction. Isn't that what a good citizen is supposed to do? Howard finally looked up, his eyes pleading. Please, Chloe, don't make this harder than it has to be. My hands are tied. The mayor's office called directly. They suggested that your continued employment here reflects poorly on the diner's reputation. He swallowed hard. I have to let you go. Your final check is here. Chloe took the envelope without a word. She wasn't surprised, just angry. This was how power worked in Aspen Ridge. A quiet phone call, a veiled threat, and a good person was out of a job. She looked at Howard, someone she'd known for years, and saw not a boss, but a coward. You know what you're doing is wrong, Howard, she said quietly. It's just business, he whispered, turning back to his paperwork, unable to face her. The second target was Liam Webb. Liam was on a creative high. His video was exploding, his subscriber count was skyrocketing, and his phone was ringing nonstop with calls from national news producers. He spent the afternoon doing phone interviews, feeling like a real investigative journalist. As evening fell, he drove back to his small rented cabin on the outskirts of town, whistling, dreaming of the career-making opportunities this story would bring. The first thing he noticed was the front door. It was slightly open, the wood around the lock splintered and broken. A cold dread washed over him, extinguishing his earlier excitement. He pushed the door open. The cabin was a mess, but not from a simple robbery. His clothes were thrown about, his suitcase overturned. But the thieves had only been interested in one thing. On the floor, in the center of the small living room, lay the shattered remains of his laptop. The screen was spiderwebbed with cracks, the keyboard smashed in. His hard drives had been pulled from his desk and stomped on, their plastic cases crushed. It wasn't theft. It was a message. It was a complete and utter destruction of his work. He sank to his knees, his hands shaking. Everything was on that laptop. The original video file, his backups, all of his work from the past year. He felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't some random break-in. This was professional. This was a warning delivered with brutal efficiency by someone who wanted to make sure he understood the stakes. He thought of Sheriff Kent's lazy smile in the diner. This had his fingerprints all over it. In a sprawling, tastefully decorated home on the wealthiest hill in Aspen Ridge, Evelyn Thorne watched the evening news. Evelyn was the mayor's wife, a woman of quiet elegance. In her youth, she had been vibrant and idealistic, but 25 years of marriage to Garrison Thorne had slowly worn her spirit down, replacing it with a carefully maintained appearance of calm composure. She had long known about her husband's corrupt dealings, turning a blind eye for the sake of peace, for the life he provided. But lately, the compromises had begun to taste like poison. She watched the news report, which featured a short, grainy clip from Liam's video. She saw the raw violence in Cade Jennings's face. She saw Laura Wilson, a woman her own age, falling to the floor, and in that moment, something inside her broke. This wasn't about zoning laws or backroom deals anymore. This was about cruelty. It was about the ugly, rotten core of the man she had married. Just then, her husband walked into the room, loosening his tie. "Ridiculous, isn't it?" he said, gesturing to the television. The whole country in an uproar over a bar fight. I've already taken care of it. The girl at the diner is gone, and the tourist photographer has been discouraged. He said it with such casual arrogance, such complete lack of remorse, that Evelyn felt a chill run down her spine. He wasn't just corrupt. He was a monster who felt nothing. She waited. She waited until he was in the shower, the sound of the water masking any noise she might make. Then, with her heart pounding in her chest, she walked into his private study. It was his sanctuary, a room of dark wood, leather-bound books, and secrets. Behind a large painting of a mountain landscape was a wall safe. She knew the combination. She had watched him open it 100 times. Her fingers, cold and trembling, turned the dial. Right 22, left 58, right 11. The safe clicked open. Inside was his insurance policy. There were several leather-bound notebooks filled with his careful handwriting, detailing every bribe paid, every kickback received. There was a small digital audio recorder containing recordings of his most incriminating meetings with Croft and Kent, and there was a single black USB drive labeled contingency. With shaking hands, she took it all. She carried it to her own small office at the other end of the house. She had her own laptop, her own secrets. She plugged in the USB drive and began copying its contents onto a duplicate drive she kept hidden in a jewelry box. File after file transferred over. Spreadsheets, scanned documents, copies of offshore bank statements. She then used a small device to copy the audio from the recorder. Just as the last file finished copying, she heard the shower turn off. Panic seized her. She quickly ejected the drives, put her husband's originals back in the safe, and spun the dial. She had just hung the painting back in place when he walked into the study, a towel wrapped around his waist. "Evelyn, what are you doing in here?" he asked, suspicion in his voice. She turned, forcing a calm she didn't feel. "Just looking for a book, dear," she said, pulling a random volume from the shelf. "I couldn't sleep." He looked at her for a long moment. His eyes narrowed. Then he seemed to relax. "Well, don't worry your pretty head about all this business. It will all be over by tomorrow." As he walked out, Evelyn leaned against the bookshelf, her legs weak with relief. He was wrong. It wasn't over. For him, it was just beginning. Clutched in her hand, hidden in the folds of her robe, was a small USB drive containing enough evidence to burn his entire world to the ground. The phone call came in the late afternoon. Ilara was sitting by the large window overlooking the lake, a book open in her lap, though she hadn't turned a page in an hour. The house, which Owen had turned into a fortress of quiet surveillance, felt both safe and confining. The caller ID was blocked. She let it ring 3 times before answering, her voice cautious. "Hello, Mrs. Wilson?" The voice on the other end was female, cultured, and strained, as if holding back a flood of emotion. "My name is Evelyn Thorne. I am the mayor's wife." Ilara's grip tightened on the phone. She glanced toward the kitchen, where Owen was methodically cleaning a piece of equipment, his movements precise and silent. "Yes, I know this is a terribly forward request," Evelyn continued, her voice dropping to a near whisper, "but I was hoping you might be able to meet me. I feel I owe you a personal apology for what happened at the diner, for the inhospitable welcome you've received in our town." It was a believable excuse, but Ilara's instincts told her this was about something far more significant than an apology. "I'm not sure that's a good idea, Mrs. Thorne." "Please." Evelyn's voice cracked slightly. "There is an old chapel, St. Jude's, on the edge of town. It's always quiet. In 1 hour. I wouldn't ask if it weren't extremely important." Ilara paused, her mind racing. A public apology from the mayor's wife would be powerful. But the secrecy, the urgency, this felt different. It felt dangerous. She looked at Owen again. He was her protector, but she was not a passive participant in this battle. She had a role to play too. "I will be there," Ilara said, her decision made. When she told Owen, his face hardened. "No, it's too risky. It could be a trap. It could also be a cry for help," Ilara countered, her gaze unwavering. She sounded desperate, Owen, not threatening. Sometimes you have to take a calculated risk to find an ally. Owen saw the steel in his mother's eyes and knew he couldn't argue. He had inherited his resolve from her. "All right," he conceded. "But you're not going alone. I'll follow. I'll be out of sight, but I'll be there. If anything feels wrong, you turn around and walk away. Understand?" St. Jude's was a simple stone chapel set back from the road, surrounded by a grove of ancient aspen trees, whose golden leaves trembled in the afternoon breeze. It was a place of peace, a stark contrast to the ugliness that had infected the town. Evelyn Thorne was already there, sitting in a front pew, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She looked smaller and more fragile than Ilara had imagined, a woman drowning in the golden cage her husband had built for her. Ilara sat down in the pew behind her, leaving a respectful distance. "Mrs. Thorne." Evelyn turned, her eyes red-rimmed but her expression resolute. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Wilson. And please, call me Evelyn." She looked around the empty chapel. "I chose this place because I need to confess." She took a deep, shaky breath. "My apology is sincere, but it's not why I asked you here. I came to give you a weapon." From her purse, she produced a small black USB drive and held it out. Her hand was trembling. "My husband," she began, her voice low and intense, "has gone too far. For years, I told myself the deals he made were just politics, the price of progress. But what I saw on that video, what his man did to you, it wasn't politics. It was evil. He is destroying this town, hollowing it out from the inside for profit." Ilara looked at the drive, then back at Evelyn's face. She saw not deceit, but profound and painful sincerity. This was the act of a woman who had reached her breaking point. "Why give this to me?" Ilara asked, her voice a gentle prompt. "Why not take it to the sheriff?" Evelyn gave a short, bitter laugh. "Sheriff Kent? He is my husband's lapdog. He enforces my husband's will. Any evidence I gave him would disappear, and I would likely have a tragic accident soon after." She leaned forward, her eyes pleading. "I'm giving it to you because of your son. My husband and his friends, they understand bullies and money and threats. They don't understand men like Owen. They are terrified of the world he represents, a world where there are rules they can't bend and consequences they can't buy their way out of." She pressed the drive into Ilara's hand. The cool plastic felt impossibly heavy. "Everything is on there," Evelyn whispered. "The ledgers, the secret bank accounts, recordings of him and Croft and Kent planning how to intimidate people. Enough to put them all away for a very long time. I trust you, and by extension your son, to get this into the hands of people who are beyond my husband's reach." Ilara closed her hand around the drive. She understood the immense risk Evelyn was taking. This was not just an act of conscience. It was an act of profound courage. "You are a very brave woman, Evelyn." "No," Evelyn said, standing up, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. "I am a coward who has stayed silent for too long. I pray I am not too late." With that, she turned and walked quickly out of the chapel, leaving Ilara alone in the silence, holding the key to Aspen Ridge's salvation. When Ilara returned to the lake house, Owen was waiting by the door, his posture tense. He relaxed slightly when he saw she was unharmed. "Are you okay? What happened?" Instead of answering immediately, she walked to the dining table and placed the small USB drive in the center. "Evelyn Thorne gave me this." Owen looked from the drive to his mother's serious expression. "She says it's everything," Ilara explained. "Proof of the entire conspiracy. She believes the local police are compromised and that only you would know how to get it to the right authorities." Owen picked up the drive, examining it as if it were an unexploded bomb. He recognized the gravity of the moment. This small piece of technology had just transformed their defensive posture into an offensive operation. Ilara had not just met with an ally. She had secured the critical intelligence that could win the war. He felt a surge of pride in her quiet strength and sharp judgment. She was every bit the warrior he was, just in a different arena. He went to his duffel bag and retrieved a heavily armored, matte black laptop. It was military issue, an encrypted device designed for field work. He powered it on, the operating system a stripped-down, secure version unfamiliar to any civilian user. He plugged in the USB drive. Files and folders bloomed across the screen. He clicked one open. It was a spreadsheet, meticulously detailed, with columns for dates, names, and payment amounts. He saw names he recognized: Cade Jennings, several town council members, next to figures that were clearly payoffs. He clicked on an audio file. Mayor Thorne's voice filled the quiet room, clear and damning. "Kent will handle the vlogger. Make it look like a robbery. We need that video to disappear." He opened another file. It was a scanned deed transfer showing a property sold by a harassed family to a shell corporation for a fraction of its value. The shell corporation was owned by Sterling Croft. He sat back, a slow breath escaping his lips. It was all there, a systematic criminal enterprise laid bare. He looked at his mother, his expression grim but resolute. She was right. This is everything. He picked up his encrypted satellite phone and made a second call to his contact in Special Operations Command. "This is Wilson," he said, his voice hard as steel. "The situation here has escalated. I have come into possession of significant evidence detailing a multi-level criminal conspiracy involving public officials. The evidence is digital and time-sensitive. I am formally requesting an immediate and direct handoff to a joint NCIS and FBI task force. This needs to come from the top down. I repeat, the local authorities are compromised. This needs to be a federal operation, and it needs to happen now." The arrival of the federal government was not a thunderous raid. It was a quiet, creeping dawn. Two black SUVs, with no official markings, rolled into the sleeping town of Aspen Ridge just as the first pale light of morning broke over the eastern peaks. They didn't use sirens. They didn't need to. Their silent, purposeful advance was more intimidating than any sound could be. The lead vehicle pulled up the long driveway to the lake house. Owen was already waiting on the porch, Shadow sitting calmly at his side. He had been up all night, watching, waiting. A woman in a crisp dark pantsuit stepped out of the passenger seat. She was in her 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and a sharp, intelligent face that held no room for pleasantries. This was Special Agent in Charge Isabella Rossi of the FBI's Denver field office, a woman known for her meticulous attention to detail and her utter intolerance for corruption. "Mr. Wilson," she said, her voice a low, professional tone. It wasn't a question. "I'm SAC Rossi. We spoke to your CO. Thank you for securing the asset." "Agent Rossi," Owen replied, nodding. "My mother is inside. The drive is on the kitchen table." Rossi's team, a mix of FBI and NCIS agents, moved with a quiet, synchronized efficiency that Owen recognized and respected. They swept the house for bugs, established a secure communications link, and treated his mother with gentle, professional deference. A forensic technician in a polo shirt and slacks took the USB drive from Owen, placing it in a static-proof evidence bag. "The evidence you and your mother have provided is substantial," Rossi said, standing with Owen on the porch as her team worked. "It corroborates several ongoing investigations into Mr. Croft's activities across multiple states. What started as a local conspiracy here is turning out to be a branch of a much larger criminal enterprise." She looked out at the tranquil lake. "We're calling it Operation Clean Slate, and today we're wiping this town slate clean." The first domino to fall was the mayor. Garrison Thorne was awake. He hadn't slept. He'd spent the night drinking bourbon and staring at his phone, watching his carefully constructed world burn down on social media. The final blow had come an hour before dawn, a call from a panicked Sterling Croft. "They know, Garrison. They know everything. My sources say the feds are moving, a joint task force." After the call ended, Thorne had walked to the large window in his study, the same window where his wife had stood just the night before. He saw them then, the black SUVs, one parked discreetly down the street from his own house. He knew with sudden, gut-wrenching certainty what had happened. It wasn't just the video. It was Evelyn. She had done it. She had taken his secrets and handed them to his enemies. The one person he had never considered a threat had become his executioner. He felt a strange calm descend upon him. It was the calm of a man who has run out of moves, out of lies, out of time. He was a king whose castle was about to be stormed, and there was no escape. He walked to his heavy oak desk and unlocked the top drawer. Inside, beneath a stack of Old Town charters, was a Smith & Wesson revolver, the gun he had been issued when he was a young deputy decades ago. He'd kept it as a souvenir of a time when his ambitions were simpler, cleaner. He looked at the picture on his desk, a smiling photo of him and Evelyn on their wedding day. They had both been so young, so full of hope. Where had it all gone so wrong? He knew the answer. It had been 1,000 small compromises, 1,000 little acts of greed that had snowballed into an avalanche of corruption from which he could never dig himself out. He heard the crunch of tires on the gravel outside. The FBI was here. He could hear their quiet, professional voices in the driveway. He would not let them put him in handcuffs. He would not let them parade him in front of the town he had both built and poisoned. He would write his own ending. When S.A.C. Rossi's team reached the front door, they found the study locked. They broke it down to find Mayor Garrison Thorne slumped over his desk, the old revolver still in his hand. His reign was over. The second domino fell in the heart of town. Sheriff Brody Kent was enjoying his morning coffee, his feet up on his desk, when S.A.C. Rossi and 2 of her largest agents walked into his office without knocking. He slowly lowered his feet, a look of annoyance on his face. "Well now, you folks are a little far from the big city, aren't you? What can I do for the FBI today?" Rossi didn't waste time with pleasantries. She placed a warrant on his desk. "Brody Kent, you are under arrest." The sheriff actually laughed, a short, barking sound. "Arrest? For what?" "Defending my town from outside agitators. For conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and multiple violations of the Racketeer-Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act," Rossi stated, her voice as cold and hard as steel. "Your town was a criminal enterprise, and you were its chief enforcer." The color drained from Kent's face. The word RICO was a death knell. He knew what it meant. He looked from Rossi to the 2 stone-faced agents flanking her. The lazy confidence that had been his trademark for 20 years dissolved into raw panic. "This is a mistake," he blustered, standing up. "You have no jurisdiction here without." "We have a federal warrant, Sheriff," Rossi said, cutting him off. "And as of this moment, your jurisdiction is limited to a 6-by-8-foot cell." She nodded to her agents. "Cuff him." The spectacle of Sheriff Brody Kent being let out of his own station in handcuffs, his face a mask of disbelief and terror, brought the town of Aspen Ridge to a dead stop. People came out of their shops and homes, watching in stunned silence as the symbol of corrupt, untouchable power was stripped of his authority and led away like a common criminal. The final domino fell at 30,000 feet. Sterling Croft was not a man who waited for the axe to fall. The moment he'd hung up on Thorne, he had initiated his escape plan. A private jet was waiting for him at a small executive airport outside of Denver. His destination, the Cayman Islands, where he had millions stashed in untraceable accounts and no extradition treaty with the United States. He was in his leather seat, a glass of champagne in his hand, watching the runway lights blur as the jet accelerated for takeoff. He felt a surge of relief. He had made it. He had outrun them. Suddenly, the plane's acceleration stopped. The engines wound down, and the jet slowed, turning off the main runway. "What the hell is going on?" Croft demanded of the pilot over the intercom. "Tower is ordering us back to the hangar, sir," the pilot's tense voice replied. "They've closed the airspace. There are federal vehicles blocking the taxiway." Croft looked out the window, and his blood ran cold. On the tarmac below, a line of black SUVs had formed a perfect, inescapable barricade. When the jet's door opened, it wasn't the ground crew waiting for him. It was a team of FBI agents in tactical gear. As they led him down the steps in handcuffs, his expensive suit rumpled, his face pale with fury and defeat, Sterling Croft looked less like a master of the universe and more like what he truly was, a common thief who had finally been caught. The weeks that followed the arrests were a strange, quiet time in Aspen Ridge. The storm had passed, leaving behind a landscape that was both shattered and cleansed. The federal presence, once a fleet of black SUVs, had dwindled to a small, discreet team of auditors working out of a temporary office in the town hall. The names Thorne, Kent, and Croft were spoken only in hushed, cautionary tones, like figures from a dark local legend. The state moved quickly to prevent a power vacuum. They appointed an interim town manager, a sharp, competent woman in her 50s named Anya Sharma. Miss Sharma had a reputation as a fixer, a specialist in municipal recovery, who was sent to communities in crisis. She had a calm, no-nonsense manner and an air of unshakable integrity that was exactly what the wounded town needed. One of her first official acts was to call a town meeting, not for blame, but for rebuilding. In the meantime, the town began to heal in small, everyday ways. At the Mountaintop Diner, a regional manager from the corporate office arrived. He fired Howard on the spot for his cowardice and complicity. Then he walked over to Chloe Vance, who was helping out as a volunteer, and offered her the position of general manager. Chloe, stunned but resolute, accepted immediately. The diner, the scene of the initial crime, became the first symbol of the town's recovery, a place where integrity was now the main course. Owen and Alara, who had planned to leave once the immediate threat was gone, decided to stay. Their quiet vacation had become something else entirely. They felt a sense of responsibility, a connection to the community they had inadvertently thrown into chaos, and now had a chance to help rebuild. At Miss Sharma's request, Alara, with her quiet wisdom and unshakable moral compass, agreed to co-chair a new citizen oversight committee, tasked with ensuring transparency in all future town contracts and governance. The night of the town meeting, the community hall was packed. There was a clear tension in the air, a mix of anxiety, grief, and a fragile, flickering hope. Miss Sharma ran the meeting with cool efficiency, laying out a clear, step-by-step plan for financial audits, a special election, and community-led development initiatives. Then, halfway through the meeting, the back doors opened, and Cade Jennings walked in. A wave of silence washed over the hall. He was thinner, his face pale and drawn. He was no longer the swaggering bully from the diner, but a humbled man who looked as if he were carrying the weight of the entire town on his shoulders. He walked slowly up the center aisle, not to the stage, but to a public microphone set up for citizen comments. He stood there for a long moment, looking out at the faces of his neighbors, faces filled with contempt, anger, and suspicion. He cleared his throat, his voice rough and unsteady. "My name is Cade Jennings," he began, his voice cracking, "and I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. What I did, there's no excuse for it. I was a bully. I was a coward. I let greed and resentment turn me into a monster." He looked directly at the front row, where Laura and Owen Saturday, Mrs. Wilson, "Mr. Wilson, I am so sorry for what I did to you. I attacked you, Mrs. Wilson, because I was told to, because I thought it was the easy way, but mostly because I was weak. I was afraid of the changes happening in our town, and instead of facing them with courage, I chose to face them with hate." Tears were now streaming down his face, and he didn't bother to wipe them away. "I have cooperated fully with the federal prosecutors," he continued, his voice growing stronger with conviction. "I've told them everything I know about everyone involved. I'll take whatever sentence they give me. But that's not enough. That's just punishment. It doesn't fix anything." He took a deep breath. "So starting tomorrow, my company, Jennings Construction, will be offering its services free of charge to every single family that was harassed or targeted by Thorne's scheme. If your fence was broken, we'll fix it. If your property was vandalized, we'll repair it. I'll use every dollar I have left to try and undo some of the damage I helped cause." The hall was utterly silent. No one had expected this. It was more than an apology. It was an act of restitution. Cade's shoulders slumped. "That's all I have to say. I'll leave you in peace now." He turned to walk away, but Owen's voice, calm and clear, stopped him. "Mr. Jennings." Cade froze, turning back, his face a mask of dread, expecting a final, damning condemnation. Owen stood up. He did not look angry. He looked assessing. "Your apology is a start," he said, his voice carrying through the hall. "Your actions will determine if it's a genuine one. This town doesn't need more division. It needs people willing to rebuild what was broken." He looked at his mother, who gave him a small, affirming nod. "My mother and I," Owen continued, "accept your offer to help this community heal." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was something more important. It was a chance. It was an acknowledgement that even the worst among them could choose a different path. A ripple of applause started in one corner of the room, then spread, hesitant at first, then growing stronger. It was not for Cade the bully, but for the possibility of redemption. In the days that followed, the town truly began to change. Cade Jennings was true to his word, his trucks becoming a common sight as his crews repaired damaged property. Their work a quiet, daily apology. Owen found himself an unlikely community figure, his quiet strength a source of reassurance for many. But it was Shadow who became the town's true icon. The children, no longer afraid, would approach him cautiously in the park, and he would greet them with a gentle nudge of his head. He became a symbol not of the violence that had brought him into their lives, but of the quiet, unwavering protection that had saved them. He was Aspen Ridge's guardian, a silent promise that the town was safe now. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple, Owen and Alara sat on the porch of the lake house. The air was cool, and the only sound was the gentle lapping of the water against the shore. "You know," Alara said, a soft smile on her face, "this wasn't exactly the peaceful retirement vacation you promised me." Owen looked at her, his expression gentle. "No," he admitted, "it wasn't." "You were wonderful, Owen," she said, placing her hand on his. "You protected all of us." "Protecting you is always my mission, Mom," he replied quietly. "That never changes, no matter where we are." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the first stars appear in the darkening sky. The house on the lake was no longer just a property on a map, a point of disagreement. It was home. It was the place where a family had stood their ground, where a community had found its courage, and where, after a long and painful storm, a new dawn had finally broken over Aspen Ridge. Amen. If this story of courage, faith, and redemption touched your heart, please help us spread this light to others. Share this video with someone who needs a message of hope. Subscribe to our channel for more stories that honor integrity and uplift the human spirit. And please comment below which character's quiet strength inspired you the most. Was it Alara's gentle defiance, Owen's protective calm, or Evelyn's brave decision to do what was right? We pray that God blesses every single one of you watching. We pray that He gives you the strength to stand firm in your values and the courage to be a protector for those in need. If you believe that good will always triumph over greed and that light will always scatter the darkness, please share your faith with us by writing Amen in the comments below. Thank you for being part of our community. Be safe and be well.